how do you learn to break apart something into its critical components, whatever it is you're trying to learn? Let's say you're trying to learn poker, for instance.
Yeah. So in the case of poker or surfing or investing, for that matter, startup investing, I think that there's a general framework that I follow, which is represented by an acronym DIS. So you have the I is is silent, so it's deconstruction, selection, sequencing, and stakes. And in some of these instances, the stakes, the consequences are built in. So if you're putting money on the line in the case of poker or investing, the stakes are somewhat built in. If you're trying to change your diet, for instance, it's not always quite as clear. You need to build in short-term consequences. But the deconstruction phase is a step where you try to take something that is very large and nebulous, like learn poker, and break that down into what it might mean. And it's really an information gathering stage, much like doing notes or a first draft of a book that you later intend to chop down to 1/3 the size.
So you could be wrong at this level. You could be drastically wrong at this level.
Well, there's no wrong or right at this level because you're gathering different tools and resources and hypotheses, and the way you go about doing that is principally through, of course, online research, and I use tools like Evernote to pull things offline and to clip web pages and so on into folders, which I did for poker, in fact, after the fact. I mean, once I was into the learning process. And then secondly, I will interview people. So I try whenever possible to find breeds of players who are dramatically different in their approaches, and ideally anomalous within the poker world. So for instance, it is widely assumed that you need to be very, very good at probabilities and mathematics, at least basic statistics, in the world of poker. Are there people, however, who play on a more instinctual level, who are playing the players as opposed to the probabilities? And I might seek someone out with that profile. And on the flip side, I might look for someone who's very, very quantitative. And they might not be a professional player per se. They could be someone like one of the co-founders of Renaissance, which is a hedge fund, or one of these hedge fund managers who plays in SALT, which is a conference, and goes to the tables and wins $100,000s of dollars, millions of dollars as non-professional players. How do they take their quantitative apparatus and apply it to poker? So I'll start gathering media stories, Wikipedia entries, so on and so forth, and eventually narrow down a handful of people that I want to interview. And it seems people erroneously assume that you have to be a best-selling author or whatever it might be to interview people. Not true at all. There are many easy ways to do it. Number one, you may not be able to interview, say, a gold medalist in the current Olympics because everyone's trying to get a hold of them, but could you find a silver medalist in the same event from 2 Olympics ago that you could jump on Skype with and use video for an hour and pay perhaps $50 to $100? Probably. It sounds insane, but it's very, very possible.
Just from my own experience, that's definitely true. Like, for instance, I always try to get better at chess. I can't get in touch with the world chess champion, but I can certainly get in touch with someone who won the U.S. chess championship 10 years ago. Is always possible.
Oh, absolutely. And so you can either you can do that for free, you can pay out of pocket, or guess what? It's like develop a basic level of writing ability or conduct an interview for a media outlet. And it could be a local outlet, the Sacramento Bee, whatever it might be, right? Choose your outlet and spec out a Q&A with someone that you want to develop a relationship with. You're offering value in the form of exposure if they want it. And throughout that process, you have, let's say, 12 questions that make it to print, and you ask 20, 8 of which are related to trying to deconstruct their skill. And again, take your time. You don't need to then close after that and ask them for free mentorship for life, which is what a lot of people do. They're like, oh, hey, could you be my mentor, i.e. unpaid part-time assistant for the rest of my life? No, that's not what you want to ask people to do. So the deconstruction process is really about teasing out leads. It's sort of acting as a detective and looking for people who also are very good at something who shouldn't be, right? So if you're trying to become...
What do you mean by shouldn't be?
Well, people who apparently lack the attributes of someone who typifies a given skill. So you might look at ultra endurance running, where the guys who are the best and the women who are the best tend to look like spiders. They tend to be built like Jack from The Nightmare Before Christmas. So what if you could find, and I'll actively seek these people out, I'll reach out to, say, the editors of magazines, writers in the field, whatever, and I'll say, who is good at this, who shouldn't be? I.e., are there any people who are massively overweight or who weigh 250 pounds who aren't overweight, just huge muscular people who run ultra endurance marathons? Like they're structurally, they shouldn't be able to do it, but are there any people? And then I'll seek them out. And those are people who need to compensate for mediocre attributes with superior technique very often, or superior training, more intelligent training. And I find those cases always very, very interesting.
So that's almost like, I would say, the secret ingredient in the soup. Seeking these people out.
I think that's a huge part of it. Another example would be trying to identify, for instance, successful business people who are severely dyslexic, and there are quite a few examples. Charles Schwab is one, the founder of Kinko's, ironically enough, and you can go down the line and find people who have overcome apparent handicaps that many other people would view as terminal in these fields, and identify what they're doing right. So let's say, I think something that's very underleveraged is the Paralympics, for instance. Like, you want to learn how to swim? Like, study someone who doesn't have legs. Like, what are they doing differently? Seriously, it's like that is just a gold mine, I think, for dissecting what is possible and what is not. All
right, so like in let's say you wanted to get to be a good surgeon, right? Let's say there was no such thing as medical school, and you wanted to be a good surgeon. What type of person would you look for?
Well, I would contact anyone tangentially related to surgery, right? Someone, a friend of mine who is a surgeon or who has had surgery, therefore has contact with a surgeon, and reach out to people in the field to ask, who in your field is controversial, but very good at what they do. That's another question that I find very helpful. Who is good at this who shouldn't be? And I would give them the examples of, say, dyslexics, or people who were not able to undertake conventional training, or people who skipped conventional training in some fashion, like anyone who's taken a circuitous route. And usually with those questions alone, I'll be able to get a hold of a lead. And that's all I'm looking for. I'm looking for a scent trail, right? So if I find out there's a controversial doctor, who's doing really interesting rehabilitative work, for instance. So tennis elbow, chronic injuries, things that are thought to never go away very oftentimes. Who's somebody who's controversial who's working in this field? And I might find someone who's using, let's say, PRP injections, where they pull out your whole blood, spin it in a centrifuge, take out the growth factors, and inject them locally into say tennis elbow, which can be very effective, and that will sounds like
it sounds like a lot of fun. I'm gonna have to install that in my house.
Yeah, you can get a home PRP unit. Just jab
all my blood out there.
Just jab syringes in your kneecaps while you're sitting on the toilet. And that is all I'm looking for in that original conversation or email thread is a foot in the door. I want a name. I want a university, a lab, something that will allow me to examine someone who is controversial yet effective, or who's very good at something despite handicaps, lack of training, whatever it might be. So that would be the first step I would take. Like, if we got off the phone right now, I would send emails to a handful of people I know are either surgeons or have interacted with surgeons.
I see. So, and then again, finding that person who stands out for something unconventional, like whether they're dyslexic or they had weird training or they shake a little or maybe they have no arms. That would be an interesting one.
Yeah, somebody who performs surgery without manual dexterity. And there are examples, I'm sure, of people who developed, say, a tremor who then proceed to address the tremor somehow, right? The process of figuring this stuff out, and I just want to point out the underlying theme here, is that if you're trying to learn anything, and explore the possibilities, right? What is possible and what is not? You have to test assumptions. And the way you test assumptions, the way you test the obvious, is by asking seemingly absurd questions. So, how would I win a swimming race without legs? if I had to run a business in 2 or 4 hours a week, or my business, whatever that happens to be, I know it's impossible, but what would I do? If I had a gun against my head, if I had terminal cancer and couldn't work for more than, I was having chemotherapy and couldn't work for more than 4 hours a week, what would I actually do? Asking these constraining, absurd questions.
So it sounds to me like over time, and this is really where you put in your hours, where you were learning how to ask these impossible questions. Because not everyone says, oh, how can I work a 4-hour week? Most people say, well, I have bills to pay. I need to work my 9-to-5 job. That was what I was taught all my life. I need to do this. And so people don't learn to ask these impossible questions.
That's right. Yeah, and it's very often trained out of you.